All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. Got a quick show for you guys today. The Memphis Grizzlies beat up on the Milwaukee Bucks yesterday, so I want to do check-ins on both of those teams. We're going to do a little bit of a deep dive in the early season for both of those teams, and then at the tail end of the show, I've got a longer mailbag. I think I've got 12 or 13 questions about a bunch of teams around the league that we're going to hit. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts, under Hoops Tonight. Also, we have new social media accounts that we're going to be using a lot more for content this year on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook. So make sure you follow Hoops Tonight on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then last but not least, keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments so that we can keep hitting them throughout the remainder of the season. I was talking with Paul this morning. He's our lead producer, and we're going to be kind of tweaking some things in terms of the layout of the show so that we can have some more consistency in terms of like the plan and what you guys can expect. Last year, we used to do power rankings on Friday, but we're going to move it to Mondays from now on. And the main reason why there is Mondays are like one of the hardest days to do instant reactions to games because we have games on Friday night, on Saturday night, and on Sunday night. So it's like 3 nights worth of games. And sometimes a team wins on Friday and then loses on Sunday or vice versa. And it can get a little tricky to hit on individual teams or individual games, I should say. So I actually think that Mondays are the perfect day to do power rankings because then I can hit at least 10 teams and talk about the whole weekend at large. So we're going to do power rankings on every Monday from now on, and we're going to do mailbags on every Friday. So make sure you keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments. Those will come around every Friday, and then we'll do power rankings on Monday, our first edition coming up on this coming Monday. And then obviously as we get into the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday stretch, that's when we'll do instant reactions to games, Timpf's tape, where we do some film, that sort of thing, as we kind of get into our normal cadence here throughout the season. And during football season, we're not going to do as many shows at night just because so many of them clash with NFL games. But once we get into January and the NFL starts to slow down, we're going to be doing a lot more instant reactions live on YouTube after games. And we still will occasionally do instant reactions after games over this early part of the season when we get really big national TV matchups. I'll keep you guys posted. That's where it's good to follow me on Twitter because I always send out announcements before we do that sort of thing. All right, let's talk some basketball. So the Grizzlies just beat up on the Bucks last night. Really was just a transition track meet type of game. For example, Memphis had 31 points in transition just in the first half. That is like a completely insane stat right there. They went into the half up 22, and there just wasn't really anything that the Bucks could do to regain control from there. Part of it was the Bucks shot really poorly. And that's kind of one of their early season trends that we'll get into when we talk Bucks. But they generated 13 unguarded catch and shoot jump shots in that first half and only made one of them. So that's where that can get a little discouraging and start to kind of snowball on you and get into some bad body language and that sort of thing. But again, we'll talk about the Bucks in a little bit. But the Memphis Grizzlies made them look slow. They made them look old. They made them look like they didn't feel like competing with them the way that they were trying to play. Again, the Bucks are a bottom 5 transition defense. I've been talking about this with the Lakers too. With teams like the Lakers and the Bucks, they have no choice but to try to figure their shit out in transition because it's a game plan thing now. It's the worst kept secret in the league that you can run on these guys. And so as a result of that, every one of these teams, when they're in their hotel room, if they're on the road or if they're at home or just in their home locker room planning before the game, doing a shoot around, whatever it is they're doing, when they're talking game plan, it's like run on these guys. They're lazy, they slow, they don't want to run. This is a consistent thing that we're going to see, and Memphis really took it to them in that game last night. Ja Morant just put on an absolute masterpiece last night. His best game of the season so far. He had 26 points and 14 assists with only 10 missed shots and turnovers combined. Absolutely fried Gary Trent Jr. It should be a crime what he did to him. He figured out early in the game that Gary Trent really couldn't hang with his first step. And so he really started to use fakes. And Gary Trent was just biting on every single fake that he was throwing. There was a 3 that Ja Morant hit in the right corner where he caught and just did a hard jab step towards the baseline. That's literally all he did. And Gary Trent damn near ran out of the frame for how hard he bit on that fake. Because obviously with Gary Trent, he's giving up so much foot speed there, they didn't really have a choice but to try to overplay that first move. And Ja was just doing a ton of damage to him in ball screens and in ISO. But it was an insane playmaking game from Ja. It wasn't just the 14 assists. It was the way that he was getting those assists. And playmaking has always been one of Ja Morant's underrated talents. But it was beautiful playmaking in pick and roll. He had about I talk about the most important read in the ball screen is the low man, right? Like, as you come off the ball screen, you could pretty much assume that the guard's going to be pursuing one way or the other, whether that's chasing over the top or that's ducking underneath. But the guard's going to stay attached as best as he can. And then the screen defender in most cases is either coming up higher to the level or dropping back, right? There's the dynamic on the backside of the defense is the low man and the screen defender, right? When the screen defender goes higher, the low man typically comes over. And when the screen defender drops back, the low man usually stays home. That is the dynamic of help defense in ball screens. And so the read that you're primarily making as the on-ball creator is that second guy, that low man. When he steps over to the roll man, the read is the skip, right? To the shooter in the corner that he's not guarding. When he stays home, the read is the roll man, right? Or if they both stay home, that's when his read is to look to score. And like he had I think at least 3 of each where he like hit the roll man when the low man stayed home, or through the skip pass when the low man came over, and just was consistently like just baiting those guys one way or another. There was one play in particular, I clipped this pass and I put it on my Twitter feed for you guys to see at _JasonLT. But it was the one where they're on the left side of the floor and Gary Trent Jr. does tag the roller. But as Ja Morant comes off, he makes like a head fake towards Gary Trent Jr.'s man. If you look really closely on the video I posted, you can actually see his head turn to the left and look off Gary Trent. Gary Trent lunges back out to the shooter, and he wasn't even in the right place because the shooter had relocated to the corner. So that's how bad the relocation and the head fake fooled Gary Trent. But as a result of Gary Trent leaving, and with Brook Lopez being somewhat higher, he was able to make the pass to the roll man, easy bucket, right? But then there was another play where like Bobby Portis was out there. Bobby Portis was done this all year, but Bobby Portis will like overhelp on low man rotations all the time, where he just like sits in the paint even when it's not necessary. And Ja was just burning him with skip passes, right? And so doing a lot of damage in ball screens, but also incredible playmaking in the open floor. And this is where Ja is so much fun. It's like the hard transition pushes and drawing the rim protector up to drop off for guys cutting along the baseline for dunks. He had this like insane pass to Jaren Jackson where he went up the floor hard and like came up with crazy pace and then hit like a boom boom dribble combination, and it brought Brook Lopez over. And out of the dribble combination, he just seamlessly whipped it to Jaren Jackson with his left hand on like this like spin away pass, and Jaren Jackson just went right over Giannis and finished. Tried to like went up like he was going to dunk it. Giannis walled him up pretty good, but Jaren was able to finish anyway with the foul. It's beautiful basketball that Ja Morant plays. He's one of the most aesthetically appealing players in the league at this point. Has so much fun doing it. Literally looks like an artist that's like painting a specific basketball masterpiece of every single game, just with the different things that he can do that are so exciting and that look so different than what other basketball players in the league can do. It's just good to have Ja Morant back. But anyway, yeah, the Bucks had no chance. So the one other thing I wanted to hit on the playmaking piece, Ja has like a really special connection that you can tell with Santi Aldama. And there's this thing that happens with basketball players sometimes where like they almost have like a mental connection where they have this firm understanding of where each other are all the time. And it's natural. It's not something that can get coached. It is something that develops over time, but like that's the interesting thing is like Santi Aldama and Ja Morant have experience playing together, but they don't have a ton of experience playing together. And so sometimes it's like a natural, organic basketball fit. And like part of it is like Ja Morant is great at attracting attention and passing out of it. And Santi Aldama is one of the more gifted off-ball scorers in the league. He's just excellent in transition in particular. He's been doing a ton of damage there, just running the floor, right? But he brings a vertical spacing element, like you can throw the ball up at the rim. I think Ja hit him for 4 lobs last night, if I'm counting properly. Like that's insane, right? But then like he also can shoot the ball well. He can drive closeouts. He's like a guy who's an expert at capitalizing on defensive attention devoted elsewhere, away from him. And then a guy who's an expert at getting defensive attention devoted to him and passing out of it. And so the two of them just kind of like seamlessly fit together. The Bucks had no chance. We'll talk about them in a minute. But quick check-in at the Grizzlies at large. They're 3-3. They had a huge win against Orlando last week. They had 66 points off the bench. They went on a huge run to end the second quarter where they basically went like, stop, bucket, stop, bucket, stop, bucket, stop, bucket. Next thing you know, they're up 26 points going into the half finished with like another one of those Ja Morant kind of like gets everybody's attention in the middle of the lane, drops it off to Marcus Smart. He lays it in at the buzzer going into halftime. So really impressive win against an Orlando Magic team that had been playing really good basketball. And then they dropped 2 games to Chicago and Brooklyn. But injuries played a huge role there, right? Like Ja Morant misses the Chicago game. And then both Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart got hurt in the Brooklyn Nets game. Marcus Smart tweaked his ankle, and then Desmond Bane is dealing with an oblique injury. But then they go without those 2 guys and beat the shit out of the Bucks, and now they're 3-3. So obviously the injuries make the data kind of sketchy, and Memphis is one of those teams too that when they're playing at home and they're playing hard, even when they're down bodies, they have a certain amount of depth that allows them to continue to compete, right? But I want to try to zoom in for a second just on the core 4 guys. They haven't played that much, but Desmond Bane, Marcus Smart, Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson have only played 13 minutes together over the course of the entire season. But they have looked very good in those 13 minutes. They've had a 124 offensive rating, obviously very good, 83 defensive rating, that's excellent, plus 41 points per 100 possessions net. 80% defensive rebound percentage. They've been really, really good with that group. And a good chunk of those minutes was against Orlando in a game where they looked really, really good. And I like that grouping. Like starting on the defensive end, Jaren Jackson is just kind of the versatile guy that ties everything together. He's a versatile front court defender that you can put on someone like a Paolo Banchero, right? But then you also can use him as a rim protector in a bunch of different, kind of basic traditional defensive coverages, right? But Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart are the 2 that make the whole thing go. They're both just like 2 of my favorite types of defenders, which is like that shorter, stockier defender that instead of constantly obsessing with contesting shots, focuses more on disrupting the rhythm of the scorer or the shooter before the shot. This is something I talk about all the time, but like Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart are masters of playing physical defense, fighting guys off of their spots, meaning like making them catch out of places where they typically catch, and then from there attacking the base and attacking the pocket. What that means to me is like, again, if I for instance, I work a ton on off the dribble shooting, and I'm 6'6" and I have a 6'10" wingspan. So like if I get into my in and out crossover, whatever dribble combination I'm going into a pull-up jump shot, once I get into the pull-up jump shot, like I don't see your hand. Like I have too high of a release point, and I practice shooting contested shots all the time. So like your hand just doesn't mean anything to me if I get to my rhythm. But if like as I'm making that dribble combination or trying to get to my footwork, if you're reaching at the ball and you can find a way to disrupt before I get it up into my shot, and maybe as a result I like fumble the ball a little bit, or on my gather one of my hands is kind of in like a slightly different spot than it normally would be because you managed to disrupt my rhythm, then it doesn't matter if you don't even contest my shot. Now as I'm rising up into a shot that is unorthodox or awkward because it's different than the stuff that I do when I'm practicing in the gym by myself, right? Like this is actually, not to go too much deeper, but this is one of my big beliefs about like the best scorers in the world. They're all very improvisational. They're all very good at like when their rhythm gets disrupted, they're good at like figuring shit out on the fly and finding a way to get like a decent look off anyway. But again, good defense, the best defense you can play, in my opinion, on a score is actually before the shot. And that's what makes this type of defender so useful is they're big, they're strong, they're good at getting up underneath professional scorers and disrupting everything they do before they get to the shot, right? That's the key. Like, I mean, look at Kevin Durant shooting a right shoulder fadeaway over a double team against the Clippers on not opening night, but the night after opening night, right? Like, KD doesn't see the hand because once he gets to his fadeaway, he's in his bag at that point. Like, you have to find a way to disrupt these guys before. And so Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart, they're ball pressuring, they're fighting guys off of spots, they're making them catch in different spots. They're both switchable in a lot of these situations. They bring that point of attack defense or defending the other team's best players. And then Ja Morant has been pretty solid. Like, he just competes, he hedges hard, he sprints back to recover to shooters, he can dig down into the lane and recover. Like, Ja Morant, like, he has his defensive limitations, but that dude tries, and he's got some tools, and that makes him pretty impactful. And so that all pieces together into a really useful defensive group. And on offense, we know how Ja Morant plays. We talked about it earlier. We know how Desmond Bane plays. He's your traditional 5-out, or I should say modern 5-out, offensive player in the sense that he's constantly coming off of screening actions as a threat to score, but really good at making the reads out of it. Like when the screen defender pops up, he's going to drop it off. When people help from the weak side, he can make those kick out passes. Very good at like driving past the rim and shooting those like kind of drifting scoop shots up off the glass, right? Like we know how those guys function, but Marcus Smart is the connective piece. He's the one that makes everything work in terms of like bridging that gap between the attention that Desmond Bane and Ja Morant garner and play finishing, whether that's hitting Ja Morant or Jaren Jackson on rolls or shooters in spot up situations. In between that, Marcus Smart is your advantage extender. He's the guy that can catch and make that next read or drive that closeout and make that next decision that turns a good shot into a great shot. Again, we haven't seen anywhere near as much of it as we'd like, but I like that core a lot. I think it works. And I know that the Marcus Smart injuries are piling up and it's been a little frustrating, but if you can get to the point where he's healthy for an extended amount of time and we get a long look at that group, I think they're going to win a lot of games. Lots of guys have been stepping up with the injuries. Like Scottie Pippen Jr. has been getting a lot of burn and pouring in 11 points and 6 assists per game on 51% shooting and 40% from three. But I think the most impressive thing that Scottie Pippen is doing is changing the like kind of the pace of the game through his ball pressure. Like when he comes in, he just starts picking up guys full court, starts poking at the basketball. This is something he's done consistently throughout this season. He was doing it to Orlando. In their guards, he did it to Damian Lillard last night, and like straight up like was giving Damian Lillard fits in the bench groups with that in that particular game. Like that's been a really useful pickup for them. Santi Aldama, we talked about earlier, just a classic off-ball score. He's giving 14 points on 63% true shooting. Jalen Wells has been playing a lot with the injuries to the guards, and he's just bringing aggressive three-point shooting. Like he's been missing some of the ones when he's guarded, but he's been hitting most of the ones when he's open or when he's off the dribble. The big thing there is like he's being guarded like a shooter. His aggressive three-point shooting provides spacing that goes beyond even what the shooting percentage says. As far as the bigs go, Zach Edey's off to a weird start. Like he hasn't been able to make his hook shot. He's just 1 for 10 on hook shots. That has obviously limited his effectiveness in the post. And the team hasn't defended well with him on the floor. But I don't think we've had nearly a large enough sample of him with the actual core of this team. And in the Orlando game, he started with the starters and they got off to a really good start. So like I would want to see a little bit more before we jump to any conclusions with Zach Edey. And Zach Edey's going to make more than 10% of his hook shots in the long run. And then Jay Huff, he's played so well to start the year, he got himself a new contract. He's shooting 50% from three. He's converting spot-up possessions at 1.53 points per possession in the early going. That's obviously very good. And the main thing with him is his mobility has been a differentiator, cutting along the baseline and running in transition and just like outrunning other bigs, which is ironic for a guy who's as big as he is, but he's done a lot of damage this season as a cutter and in transition. Overall metrics for Memphis, they're 12th in offense, 16th in defense, 13th in net rating, and 10th in rebounding. So a lot of middle of the pack stuff there. But again, that data is being influenced a lot by injuries, so not too much to take out of that. On the Bucks front, they're bad everywhere right now. 24th in offense, 24th in defense, 28th in net rating, and 28th in rebounding in their 1-4 start. We'll get into some of the basketball details later, but like everything starts with this team with their willingness to compete. Right now, they look lifeless. And when you're older and slower already, just in terms of the personnel that you have compared to the rest of the league, you have to make up for it by being an effort and execution team. You have to, because if the younger, faster team also plays much harder than you and is much more smarter and disciplined, you're just going to get your butt kicked every single night. And that's basically what's happening right now. They're not just losing; they're getting ran off the floor in a lot of these games. Like this is really, really ugly. And like the effort and focus level with this team is embarrassing. Their transition defense, they have bad floor balance every time. They gave up a dunk against Memphis, I think it was to Santi Aldama, on a made layup by Damian Lillard, where as Dame was driving, everybody was sunk into the corners and was below the foul line. And it's like, what are you doing? You're never going to get stops in transition if you don't have guys above the break that actually get back on defense. That's just undisciplined basketball. That's sloppy, right? But even then, it's like guys aren't sprinting. I had a coach when I was in college who always used to talk about like your first two steps being super important in transition. Like when you turn your body and get your momentum going from scratch, once you get running you can kind of ride that wave back, and then it's all about just your transition defense principles. But like, if you jog your first step, or if you hesitate for a second, you're dead to rights against these fast teams, especially when you're on the road and they're playing in front of their home crowd, all juiced up with energy. And so it's like bad floor balance, guys not running back, and then missing basic execution details. Like the only two things that really matter in transition defense is take away the rim and stop the ball. If you can stop the ball and take away the rim, you'll at least force them to make a jump shot. And when guys are sprinting up the floor into jump shots, they might get 1.1 points per attempt. And yeah, you're going to have stretches where maybe they hit a couple of threes on you and it can get and they can go on a little bit of a run. But like really bad transition defenses, they give up lots of dunks. And that's where it can become problematic. Like you have to at least, if your transition defense is compromised, make them make a jump shot. Make them make a jump shot, and automatically you'll improve your transition defense by limiting their efficiency in those situations. And they're not stopping the ball. That was a huge problem against Memphis, like straight up just not stopping the ball as guys were dribbling up the floor and getting where they wanted to go. And then in those transition situations, not protecting the rim, and they were giving up cutters along the baseline for easy baskets. So like they've been one of the worst transition defenses in the league. I don't know how they're going to fix that problem until they start competing, because that's like the bare minimum is give a shit. Then you can work on the execution pieces, and like none of that's there right now, and it doesn't look good. Their on-ball defense is terrible. Pick and roll ball handlers are getting 1.11 points per shot attempt against them. That's dead last in the entire NBA. They brought in Gary Trent Jr. and DeLon Wright specifically to help with that, and so far they've only gotten worse. Gary Trent was straight up awful against Ja Morant last night. I know it's a tough matchup, but like he didn't do anything to make him feel uncomfortable. They've been a bottom 10 ISO defense as well. They're not forcing any turnovers. It's just they're not getting anything out of their ball pressure in on-ball defense. Their help side defense, guys are sinking in the paint when it's completely unnecessary. We talked about that earlier with Bobby Portis. You have Brook Lopez and Giannis Antetokounmpo down there. You do not need to pack the paint with guys that need to be guarding shooters out on the perimeter. Again, Bobby Portis is the main culprit here, but it's everybody. I've seen everybody in their role player core make that specific mistake. Again, like if Brook Lopez is in a drop coverage and he can reasonably protect with the roll man, you do not need to be digging down from the weak side and giving away easy kick out threes. Their defensive rebounding statistically is okay. Like they're giving up the 9th fewest offensive rebounds per game. But again, when you factor in they have such a massive front line, the problem there is they're still giving away about a half dozen types of offensive rebounds a game that are long 3-point shot rebounds that come out towards the foul line area, and they're just not crashing from the corners. And that's where like Dame has had an issue there. Gary Trent's been losing a lot of 50-50 balls to start this year, like that, and he's supposed to be a more athletic version of what they had in that position last year. Like they're just not competing enough again in these like loose ball situations. They're losing on the margins every single night, and that just puts them at a massive disadvantage. On offense, it really is mostly just extremely poor shooting. Like they're just 1 for 13 on unguarded attempts in the first half last night against Memphis. That's always going to give you some issues. They're shooting just 29% total on all catch and shoot jump shots this year. So below 30% on catch and shoot jump shots, that's tough. Only the Spurs have been worse. Last year, they were top 10 in that category with basically the same roster. I mean, Malik Beasley, I would say Malik Beasley in the aggregate has been a better shooter than Gary Trent Jr., but Gary Trent shot just as well as Malik Beasley last year, and he should shoot better than he's been shooting. A lot of guys are just shooting really, really poorly. That tends to influence other things in the game, right? Like basketball we talk about basketball as a rhythm sport all the time. Everything kind of feeds into the next thing in line. And so like you can imagine a scenario where it's like you run offense and you get a wide open 3 and the guy misses it. And it's a long rebound. They get it. They sprint it down your throat and they get a dunk because you're not running back on defense. Then you run up the floor again, you run another play, and you generate another wide open 3. And that one misses too. But maybe it's a better rebound, and so you're actually able to get back and set your defense. But your point of attack defense is so bad that the ball screen just generates another wide open look, and they score again. And then you go down, you generate another wide open look, and it just kind of snowballs. Body language gets bad. guys are less willing to compete because they can feel the game slipping away, and it just kind of like snowballs into a massive problem, right? And so like that kind of stuff I think could turn around just by some shots going in. You imagine the exact same situation. Wide open look. This time it goes in. Gary Trent just hits the shot that he's been missing all season. Now you have a chance to set your defense. Gary Trent feels better about himself because he just hit a shot. Now he's really getting into the ball. You defend a little bit better in your ball screen. You get a stop. Now you get a rebound. You go back down the other end. Now you're starting to build that snowball in your direction. That's that rhythm and momentum battle in basketball games. And just you missing a bunch of wide open looks is certainly going to affect that. And so, again, it doesn't look good. There's a lot of bad body language. Dame in particular looks super disengaged on both ends. He's obviously just an awful defensive player, but he's also shooting poorly. He's just 6 for 33 from 3 in his last 4 games. And like last night, it was like one of the worst body language games I've seen from him. He looked like he just didn't want to play. He didn't really look to score with the starting group, and then he's just getting picked up full court by Scottie Pippen Jr., and he's just like fumbling the ball everywhere and just really, really sloppy. Their bench is giving them nothing. Like Bobby Portis is cold to start the year, and he's a damaging defender. Pat Connaughton is getting targeted every single time he's on the floor, and he's not hitting threes. But I do want to give this a larger sample before we jump to any conclusions, because like if they start hitting their open looks, that could just start making everything easier for them. But it doesn't get any easier from here. They have the Cavs twice after this. The Cavs that are an excellent defensive team that forces a ton of turnovers and is always looking to run the floor in transition. Like the Cavs are a really bad matchup for the Bucks. They initiate a ton of offense from the guard position, and you're talking about the worst pick and roll ball handler defense in the league. Like there's a chance that the Cavs win both of those games. Now, the first one's in Milwaukee, and so like that's the one you got to target if you're Milwaukee. You have to beat the Cavs at home. You have to rise your home crowd to just get some momentum there and see if you can't figure it out. But like that's 2 really tough games. Okay, then you play the Jazz. That's probably a win. But then it's the Knicks and the Celtics. So like there's a chance if they get beat by the Cavs twice, there's a chance they could be sitting at 2-8. By the time they get through their first 10 games. That is why they have to get their shit together. That could be absolute crisis mode. Then you're looking at like, I mean, I saw a clip of Giannis like sitting along the baseline in garbage time yesterday. Like you want to try to avoid that sort of storm cloud kind of forming over the team, because that could be a runaway freight train in no time. But again, let's give it a larger sample. All of these teams have only played, basically a half dozen games or less. So let's give them some time to figure their shit out. Does your favorite NBA player have what it takes to be crowned king of the court? Find out at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. DraftKings is offering $1 million a day in bonus bets for the first 10 days of the NBA season. That's $10 million in bonus bets. Here's how you shoot your shot. Opt in and get a daily NBA profit boost token. Pick a pregame NBA player prop to boost, and if that player leads the league that night in points plus rebounds plus assists, you win a share of the $1 million in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS to win a share of $1 million in bonus bets if your player is king of the court. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, let's get to the mailbag. Hi, Jason. Big thanks for the great content. For a relatively new NBA follower like me, your videos are really helpful in understanding the context of each play and situation. Wanted to ask, what is the ceiling and the floor this season for the Warriors, in your opinion? So they're so good in terms of their depth of quality role players that always play hard and fly around on defense, and they're so well coached, that I think their floor, that's been the biggest change for me. Like I coming into the season viewed them as like in that like 9-10 seed range. And now I think like the absolute basement for them is like a home court play-in game. So like I think you're looking at like 7 seed as the bottom. Like they're just going to win so many regular season games on the strength of their depth of talent and how hard they play. The NBA just has, first of all, you have these like 10 teams at the bottom that the Warriors should beat basically every time they play because they're sloppy and bad, and the Warriors are deep, well-coached, and play hard, right? Then you have the next 20 teams, and there are a lot of serious teams in there, like dead serious teams that are in that like top 5-6 group that are super sharp and that have lots of talent. And they're going to give the Warriors some issues. That's something I do believe because of their lack of firepower. But in that next 15 teams, there's a lot of teams like the Bucks, like the Lakers, contenders, like the Sixers. There's the Suns are kind of in this group too, where it's like they have some older veteran guys. Their effort and consistency of execution could be an issue with them throughout the season. And those are the groups of teams that I think the Warriors will fare pretty well against, even though like they might struggle against a team like that in a playoff series where the firepower becomes a bigger issue. In the night in, night out schedule of the regular season, they're just pain in the ass speed and execution and ball pressure and all the shit that they do is going to just cause them to upset those teams a lot. And so like, I really do think they're going to win a good amount of regular season games. So I'd say I at this point, I would be surprised if the Warriors didn't finish above the play-in just simply because of that super, super high floor. But if I had to choose like their absolute floor with this group, if they made absolutely no trade, I think we're looking at like that 7-8 seed as the bottom. But I do believe that they'll finish above the play-in. As far as their ceiling goes, it's entirely dependent on whether or not they can make a trade. Like I know there is a segment of Warriors fans who disagrees with me about this and thinks that the Warriors are substantially better than their kind of like roster on paper looks. But like I'm of the opinion that if the Warriors ended up in, let's say, a 5 or a 6 seed, they had to go on the road and win a playoff series against one of the top 4 teams in the West, I don't think they could. So like I think this current roster kind of has a first round exit as a ceiling. But in order to reach their ultimate ceiling, it all comes down to what kind of player they can get back in a trade. And then 2, what level can Steph Curry get to this year? If Steph Curry can get to the level that he was at in 2022, or not, maybe not quite that high because I'm not sure he can get there anymore. But if he can get close, like if he can like legit play at a top 10 level all season, and you bring in a high-powered number 2, there's so much good in terms of the role players and the execution and the experience and the defensive ceiling with Draymond Green that I do think that there is a chance for them to get out of the Western Conference. And then again, like put a bunch of really scrappy defenders against Boston that can cover ground in space, and maybe Steph reaches a crazy level and he gets good contributions from his number 2. You have a puncher's chance there, right? But like in order to get there, they've got to have that ceiling, and that ceiling is dependent on Steph and who you get as the number 2. Next question: what archetype of player should Golden State target in a consolidation trade to take them over the top? Let's take a look at the strengths and weaknesses of the roster. Okay. They're super deep at guard, and they're deep on the wing, right? Like that is a position group where there's not really much opportunity for anybody to play anyway, right? They have plenty of athleticism. They have plenty of defense. The main position groups where they're a little weak is like at that like power forward spot for small ball groups, right? Like when Draymond's at center, it's like, okay, there's Kuminga, but like we have our question marks about Kuminga in high leverage situations against the best teams in the league. And then Kyle Anderson is like your other option there. And then when they go big, like do they have a big enough center? Do they have like a big enough center to actually give themselves an ability to hang with some of the huge front lines in the league? Teams like Denver, teams like Minnesota, teams like the Lakers, so on and so forth, right? So like it's like a backup center that is a legitimate big body that they can play, and then a forward that can score. And so that to me is what I would really be targeting, is a forward that can score the basketball from the perimeter. This is why I was so high on Lauri Markkanen for them over the summer. Like, I don't think you want another skill guard next to Steph, because then you run the trouble of like, if I have Steph and another skill guard, I'm not super athletic in the backcourt anymore. I like those athletes that the Warriors are constantly playing at the 2 and 3. The 2 and 3 between Pods and Wiggins and DeAnthony Melton and Gary Payton, like all of those athletes that they have at the 2 and 3, you're golden. Ideally, you want a forward that can score the shit out of the basketball. There's a bunch of options there that could be available this year. We talk like Lauri Markkanen. I don't think he becomes available for trade until the deadline, but he's a potential option, even though you missed out on him this summer. There's Jeremy Grant. There's Brandon Ingram. There could be Jimmy Butler. Like there are a bunch of guys that could become available in that grouping. Now imagine a scenario where you make that type of deal, right? You trade depth and draft compensation for one of those big versatile scoring forwards. Now you can imagine a scenario where and let's just say they managed to pull off a trade for a big-bodied center. I don't think that's as complicated of a deal. I don't think you're looking for a starting level player, because I think ultimately this team goes down with Draymond at the 5. I mean, not in the large sample eating regular season innings, but when push comes to shove in a playoff setting, you're going down with Draymond Green at the 5. I felt the same way about the Lakers. It's like everyone wants to put AD next to a center, and that's cute and all, but like, get a bench center, whatever you want to do to improve that situation. But when push comes to shove, you're going down with AD at the 5. Like you're playing you need speed. It's just the way the league is. You need speed. You need to cover ground. You need to play 5 out. You need to create space. So you can imagine a scenario. Let's say it's Steph Curry and whichever 2-guard Steve Kerr feels like playing in those high leverage situations, whether that's Brandon Podziemski, maybe that ends up being a Gary Payton, maybe that ends up being a DeAnthony Melton, right? Like maybe that ends up being a Buddy Hield. But then 3, I think Andrew Wiggins kind of is just the ideal 3 for this team. He can score the ball, he can defend the other team's best player, can do all that stuff. Then you imagine Draymond Green at the 5, and then you have this big scoring forward. Basically, just imagine a better, more reliable veteran version, a grown man version of Jonathan Kuminga at the 4. That's where it gets exciting, because now as I look at that group, like let's say that at the 2 we are looking at Brandon Podziemski and Andrew Wiggins at 2 and 3. I've got Brandon Podziemski and Andrew Wiggins can guard the other team's best 2 perimeter players, right? I've got Draymond Green anchoring things at the 5, and then Steph and whoever it is that you get at the 4 can bring the real offensive firepower piece. And then you've got this bench group that has Buddy Hield and DeAnthony Melton and Gary Payton, Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, whoever it is that you have remaining after that trade, with Kevon Looney kind of anchoring that as like a bench center. You have all of that there, or whatever center you get back in that deal as Draymond's backup. There's all of this potential for like piecing together a useful bench group, because you're so damn deep and you have so many good basketball players that you can fit into that spot, right? And so like that to me is like the direction that I see this going, is like a forward that can really score the basketball. That I think is so important for this team. 1 is reliable backup scoring to Steph. 2, being able to actually generate offense against the best defenses, so you don't have that problem you had against the Clippers where you go up against another team that has a bunch of fast guards, and so suddenly their fast guards cancel out your fast guards and you're not able to generate shots, right? Like a big scoring forward is a great counter to that, because then even if you run into a team like the Clippers that are doing a bunch of switching and they have a bunch of small guys, you have a guy you can dump the ball down to. Like Ideally, it'd be Jonathan Kuminga in like 4 years. That would be like the perfect guy for that spot. But you don't have 4 years because Steph is getting older. And so again, I'm always looking at this through the context of like the reality that the Warriors have to make some attempts to try to contend with Steph. I know there's a kind of the schism that's happening with the Warriors fans, where there's like a segment of Warriors fans that's like, I would rather, kind of just stay status quo and try to make something work with the young players. Here's what I think is going to happen if you do that. You're going to be mediocre in the short term because you don't have enough firepower, and then you're going to be mediocre in the long term because none of these young players are superstars. A lot of them are good. I think Jonathan Kuminga can be a star. I think there's all-star potential there. Here's what Jonathan Kuminga is not. Jonathan Kuminga is not Anthony Edwards, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic. He is not going to be one of the very best players in the league. You are a reputable franchise in this league because you had one of those guys. You had Steph Curry for his entire career, and he won you 4 championships. He is the guy that gave you that potential. As soon as he's gone, that potential is gone. You can pretty quickly become a team that's just kind of interesting and exciting and has a lot of young players, but it's like, who's the guy, right? Who's the exciting piece that turns all of this around? And there's just, unless you had that would be the one thing that would change my mind. If there was one of these guys, if Moody or Kuminga or Podziemski or Trace Jackson Davis had true MVP potential, then I would totally understand your guys' point about not wanting to cash in things for this season. But you can either choose to be mediocre in the future, or mediocre now and mediocre in the future, or you can move assets to try to improve your ceiling now, or you can move Steph and try to be better in the future, which you're not going to do because he's the heart and soul of the franchise. So like mediocre now, mediocre in the future, or give up some of your future flexibility in asset trove to try to drive something that gives you a chance to contend with this group. That's kind of my outlook on the Warriors through the early part of the season. At this rate, would it surprise you if Ryan Dunn plays himself into the Suns starting lineup? Lineups with Dunn have a plus 16 net rating so far. It's early, but if he's making the long ball, he's exactly what they need. Their traditional starting five just seems to be too flawed. I think he should start. I don't think it's going to happen. And the main reason why it's not going to happen is this Tyus Jones thing, which there's a politics element. He took a discount basically to get a starting spot. I've been, from the beginning of this process, do not understand the Tyus Jones thing. Like, you're right. They struggled with ball pressure against Minnesota. You're right. There are times that Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker struggle to like get the defense in rotation and like just trust each other to play drive and kick basketball. Those things are true. But by far the biggest issue with this team is their like physical element, like their ability to win rock fights, their ability to handle just ugly basketball. And so I always thought that going the direction of someone like Ryan Dunn, like if you have, Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal on the floor, and you have a center of some kind, because that's the thing. I don't think they're going to start Ryan Dunn at center long term. I think that would just be too much to ask Kevin Durant defensively to help Ryan Dunn on that back line with like just size and physicality. But like I think we'll see some more small ball groups with Ryan Dunn and Tyus Jones both out there. But in terms of the starters, if it's going to be the 3 stars and a center, your options there are like put another guard out there, or put a big forward that does a bunch of dirty work and can shoot threes. And so like I totally would go that direction. I would just start Booker, Beal, KD, Ryan Dunn, and then whichever center's not currently soiling himself, like the Sun centers have been most of the year. I do think their centers will play better over time. Like Nurkic is just playing really shitty right now, but I think he'll be better than he has been. But like the thing with the Tyus Jones thing is like he does help you a little bit with managing ball pressure and managing the flow of the game, but he does not help you on defense. And I also do believe in diminishing returns off the ball. And so, like, there's just not that big of a gap off the ball between Tyus Jones and some of these other role players that they have on the bench. And so my thing is like, and by the way, that's manifested in the numbers. For all the talk about Tyus Jones, and I saw another article about it this morning where people are acting like it was the most magical decision ever. They've been better without Tyus Jones this year. They're negative with Tyus Jones on the floor, and they're like plus 11 net with Tyus Jones off the floor. And again, that's small sample size. That'll even out a little bit. I do think they'll have moments where they look great with Tyus Jones. But to me, that was like, there was a small hole that you could plug there with Tyus Jones, and you chose to. But there's a giant hole, which is like your inability to hang in the physical areas of the game. Ryan Dunn is a massive, Ryan Dunn developing this quickly into a useful offensive player is one of the biggest swing factors for a franchise that I've seen relative to what the deal seemed like at the time, which is just a mid-first round pick in recent NBA history. Like, this is crazy. Like, the Suns got a wrecking ball of a defensive forward that is knocking down threes. They got him in the the latter portion of the first round. Like, that is crazy, guys. That is crazy. That is like a super fortunate thing that happened to this team. And like, I in the long run would like to see the Suns gear more towards like, hey, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker, how about you guys figure out ball pressure and actually just hold yourselves accountable as decision makers to consistently make the right reads, get the defense in rotation, and play drive and kick basketball. And that way, Ryan Dunn can be out there helping you kick everyone's ass in the rock fight areas of the game. And I think you're going to do a lot more winning. So I'm hoping that's the direction they go in the long run. But again, they're 4-1. So there's that too. The Cavs have been debatably the most impressive team in the league this year, even with Donovan Mitchell playing well below his standards. What is their ceiling with him playing like Donovan Mitchell? So this is the thing. I talked about this yesterday. Like, everything with Kenny Atkinson has been about trying to improve their play on the margins, right? Like forcing more turnovers, getting out in transition a ton, just in general, like hunting transition opportunities as much as possible, doing more switching, like all these like little things that they've done that have helped them build advantage on the margins. But one of the things I talked about in yesterday's show is when you get to the later rounds of the playoffs, you inevitably run into other good teams. Like when you get to the conference finals and finals, or hell, let's just call it the conference semis and on, when you get to the top 8 teams in the league, most of them are well coached. Most of them are disciplined. Most of them have good habits. Most of them also do their best to win on the margins. And so suddenly it kind of turns into this like, how is your half-court offense versus our half-court defense? and how is your half-court defense versus our half-court offense, right? That is where Donovan Mitchell is the ultimate ceiling raiser, right? Like if you can get Donovan Mitchell playing at or near the superstar level, and then the modest improvements we've seen, like Darius Garland played one of his best games as a pro the other day against the Knicks. That's exciting. Evan Mobley is having a really interesting start to the offensive season, getting more on-ball reps. If you can piece all of that together into a higher quality half-court offense, that is where the ceiling lies for this Cleveland Cavaliers team. Why can't everyone just react to the career Wemby is having instead of reacting to the career they think Wemby is going to have? He's not anywhere close to the top 25 players in the league right now. Some of y'all are high on your own predictions. This is a confusing one to me. Victor Wembanyama just had a 25-5-5-5-5 game last night, which I think has only been done a handful of times in the history of the NBA. It also had only been a handful of games, and over the tail end of last year, he was like literally awesome and turned a bad Spurs team into a net positive when he was on the floor over the tail end of the year. Like, I'm not going to just sit here and like rewrite the history of Victor Wembanyama over a bad week and a half. Like, yeah, I'm disappointed in how he's looked. Talked a bunch of shit this summer about no one works as hard as he does, and he came out playing like shit. It's not a good look. But it's been a week and a half. Let's give him some time, guys. It'll be, I would imagine that we're going to see a lot more of like what we saw last night from Victor Wembanyama in the long run. The anticipated Luka, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander MVP race this year hasn't fully manifested itself yet. Have you noticed anything with either of them that's worth monitoring beyond shooting luck? Luka got hurt to start training camp. Anytime you go away from the game for a while and then come back, it takes a while to get your legs back underneath you. He's clearly just like playing his way into shape right now. He also more or less in terms of physical conditioning looks like where he was last year. And so Luka just has a tendency to play his way into shape. And so that's always the thing with Luka is like, is he going to play his way into shape before he gets banged up? Because if he gets banged up, that's where it can start to snowball on him a little bit. But like him getting hurt to start camp is really the only reason that went the way it did. On the Shai front, he's really just trying to build out a part of his game that's new. He's attempting more than twice as many pull-up three-point shots this year as he did last year. And so as he's working, that's investing. He knows that, like if there was a must-win playoff game tomorrow, Shai's probably going to not take 7 pull-up threes a game, right? He's trying to invest in that now so that he has that in his bag when he gets to the postseason this year. I would imagine that Luka and SGA will be our frontrunners for MVP in the long run. Given the plethora of picks, depth of current roster, and the need to pay young stars in the not-too-distant future, if you were the Thunder, would you consolidate assets sooner than later? It's tough to rock a boat this sturdy, but they won't/can't play everybody. This is where you got to look at the difference between deadline deals and deals over the summer. You're right. If you make some sort of giant deal over the course of this season, that has the potential to rock the boat, so to speak, and mess with the rock-solid chemistry that this team has, right? Deals over the summer, though, that's just part about being a professional athlete. And then no matter what happens, if guys come in and out of the door over the summer, you have the ability to, from the start of training camp, reestablish your culture and move on, which, by the way, they've done with Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein this year, right? So, like, the offseason is the best time to make deals, right? Here's the only thing that's tricky, though. There is a certain amount of, like, yeah, you do have a lot of talent now, and you might not have as much talent in the future, and you might lose some of these assets for nothing, right? So that's where you have to make a call based on this season. That's what deadline deals are for. When we get to February, Isaiah Hartenstein will hopefully have returned and played a good amount of basketball. You'll have a lot of exposure to Alex Caruso. You'll get to see where Chet Holmgren is. Like, Chet Holmgren's been playing like one of the top 15 players in the league to start the year. By the way, side note, I've had a lot of people upset. Like, I do player rankings in the summer as like a very in-depth look at how I expect things to go this season. Once we start playing basketball, I'm only going to talk about the way guys are actually playing. Like, you're right. I had Victor Wembanyama ranked 18th and Chet wasn't in my top 25. Chet's playing better basketball than him to start this year. I'm trying to acknowledge that. The purpose of these shows is to react to the basketball that's actually happening. It's very different than in the summer. In the summer, everything is very big picture. It's theoretical. It's a lot of that kind of stuff, right? During the season, I really am only interested in covering what's actually happening in these games. And so, like, when I talk about, oh, this guy's playing at a top 10 level, this guy's playing at a top 15 level, I don't care about my power rankings in the past or player rankings. I'm talking about what's actually happening. We're talking about the actual games that like, there's games on tonight that no one's going to care about what the player rankings were back in August in this particular games that are happening tonight. Okay. So, like, that's just a little side diatribe. But anyway, on the Thunder front. Chet's been playing at a top 15 level to start this year. Let's see if it lasts. If we get to February and Chet seems kind of limited, and the stuff at the start of the year was kind of fluky, and there appears to be a substantial hole somewhere on the roster, this is a team with real championship potential. You kind of owe it to your team to make the investment to try to give them what they need to win. Like last year, they were just kind of a cute story in a lot of ways. They were one seed. I never thought they were going to win multiple playoff rounds, and they didn't. They lost in the second round. They actually impressed me by pushing Dallas the way that they did in that second round series. This year is real. They came into the year as one of the biggest championship favorites. They have huge pressure and expectations. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is in his late 20s now. Like this is winning time for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And so when you get to February, if you sit there and you're like, I like our point of attack defense, I like the depth and versatility of our point of attack defense, I like our defensive front line, I like our defensive versatility in terms of the scheme, I think our shot creation is good, Shai, Jalen, and Chet seem totally up for it, we have tons of shooting, I like our transition speed, we're holding up well on the glass, our size is good. Like if you look at it and you go, everything's good, then yeah, you don't make a deal. Yeah, because it's not worth messing with the chemistry, right? But yeah, if you get to February and it's like, all right, everything looks good, but like this Isaiah Hartenstein thing at the 5 next to Chet really isn't solving that problem at the power forward spot. Guys, we got to go get a power forward. You know what? We talked about this forever. We never really thought it was worth pulling the trigger. I think we should pull the trigger on Lauri Markkanen. Let's just go. Let's just call Danny Ainge and let's offer him everything and let's try to make this thing happen, right? Like, because at that point, you have a gaping hole in your roster and you have real championship pressure and expectations. And yeah, you've got some assets that are burning a hole in your pocket. You better do something with them, right? And you take the risk of whatever could happen with team chemistry at that point. But like that is a decision you make in February, and you only do it if you feel like you have a big hole that you have to fix in order to actually reach the promised land in the playoffs. Do you believe the Orlando Magic can stay around 500 while Paolo is out? And who do you believe needs to step up in doing so? So, yes, I think they can. Main reason why is they're a really good defense and rebounding team. That's like another extremely high floor concept, right? If you defend hard and you rebound well, you're going to be in a lot of basketball games. From there, it's just about the fact that you still have a high-level shot creator, in this case, Franz. Franz Wagner is the guy that's got to step up. If Franz Wagner can maintain the high offensive floor, which, by the way, he's been shooting the ball really well to start this year. He's such a gifted playmaker at the forward spot. If Franz can be a decent offensive engine and you defend well and you rebound well, you got a chance to stay around 500 in that Eastern Conference schedule. Should we have seen this coming with the Bucks? They were a mess since the Doc hiring, and with their effort this year, it seems more like a continuation rather than a new issue. Is this core really lost in needing a change, or is this something that can be rectified by playing more? I didn't see this bad of a start this year, but like I did talk a lot this summer about how the Bucks were below 50 wins last year in a weak Eastern Conference, despite the fact that Dame and Giannis both played 73 games. And there was a good segment of Bucks fans that were like all over my case about that. Because, we're going to big bounce back year. We're going to win 50-something games. We're a top-tier championship contender. And I just was like, if you would have won more with Dame and Giannis last year than you did. And I'm not talking about like, they should have won 60 games last year. But they didn't even get to 50. Like, I would have been more on board with that if they were like a 53, 54 win team last year. And you're like, okay, we're a 53, 54 win team. We're adding in another training camp with Dame. Dame's in a better place emotionally and mentally. We made these roster upgrades. Let's go do it. I was kind of under the impression that they would be more or less the same team that they were last year, which is a mediocre regular season team that has somewhat of a high playoff ceiling because of Dame and Giannis. They've been worse than that to start this year, but most of that comes down to they're shooting the ball like shit. And as they're shooting the ball like shit, it's exacerbating their transition defense issues, and it's manifesting in a lot of bad body language, and the vibes are really bad. So, like, I think it's way too early to completely write the Bucks off because they might just start making shots, and that might just snowball into a bunch of good for them. But right now, definitely a bad look, but I will say I didn't understand any of the Bucks fans that had really high expectations for this particular team. I just didn't see where they were getting that sense of optimism from. Do you think that Lakers might have a legitimate chance to go to the finals this season, or at least the second round of the playoffs? I don't think they have any chance to go to the finals as currently constructed. They just are too slow on the perimeter. This is a big thing that I've been talking about for years now. Like, your ability to move and cover ground on the perimeter is one of the most important parts of the game, right? Like, that's how you guard. That's how you pressure the ball. That's how you chase shooters around. That's how you get up and down the floor in transition. That's how you generate dribble penetration, which is one of the big sources of wide open three-point looks. Like perimeter athleticism is one of the most important elements of modern NBA basketball, and the Lakers just don't have any. Their athletic perimeter players are either rookies like Dalton Knecht or Bronny James, or a guy that is super young and inexperienced like Max Christie, who's been a disaster on offense to start the year, right? So like, those are your athletes at the guard position. The Lakers are actually really strong in so many ways on their roster. They're huge. The Rui, LeBron, AD front line is awesome. They're excellent at scoring in the paint. Big shout out to LeBron James and Anthony Davis there. Their defensive front line, when they need to be, is really good. When LeBron is engaged and flying around, when Rui is engaged, when AD is being AD, their defensive front line is great. I think they have plenty of shooting. I think they have plenty of ball handling. I think they have plenty of playmaking talent. They have all of those boxes checked, and then they just have like an empty box for perimeter athleticism. And it's just like a death sentence for this particular team. And that's why I keep talking about them needing to upgrade that D'Angelo Russell spot into an athletic guard. As far as their ceiling goes, that's the first piece. Got to do something to upgrade the perimeter athleticism. After that, it's like LeBron and AD, right? Like, can LeBron get, like, if you can do that, if you can bring in a real athlete at the 2 for D'Lo, and you get the same LeBron you got last year in the playoffs, and you get the same Anthony Davis you got last year in the playoffs, and to start this year, and you have JJ Redick adding that focus and attention to detail over the course of the season so that they establish championship habits. Now we're talking about a team that I think can win the conference, and who knows what would happen in the NBA Finals. But like, the LeBron hasn't been very good to start this year. That's a little tricky. And then that guard athleticism piece is just a huge problem. And so again, I think that we're going to learn, again, it's super early in the season still, so I think we're going to learn a lot more about the Lakers in the long run. But no matter what happens, because I think JJ Redick's really good, and I think that this roster is pretty good, and so I think that they're going to win a lot of games no matter what. But like, they could be, let's say we fast forward and they're 20-12. Once we get through the first 32 games of the season, I will still be sitting here at 20-12 saying, this is cute and all, but they're not going to be able to beat 4 good teams without real guard athleticism, which they don't have right now. So that's kind of where I'm at. Do you think the way Rui is playing can be suitable next to LeBron if they upgrade the 2? Also, do you think the Lakers 1-4 switching package will change once they get a defensive-minded 2? So a couple things. So first of all, I think Rui has been much better this year than he was towards the tail end of last year. He had a really rough playoff series against Denver. Bad matchup too, because it's Michael Porter Jr. is a movement shooter, and his biggest weakness on defense right now is tracking shooters on the perimeter. But here's the thing. If you turn D'Lo into a real perimeter athlete, now I think Austin Reeves is actually a good perimeter defender. He's just miscast as a lead perimeter defender. You can't have him guarding Donovan Mitchell or the best perimeter player on the other team every night. He needs to be guarding the second best perimeter player. So at that point, if you have 2 of those guys, because right now you also have to hide D'Lo. That's the fucking problem. So like, if you find a way to where you have a guard at the 2 that can guard the other team's best guard, and you have a guard at the 1 in Austin that can guard the second best perimeter player or the movement shooter, chances are you'll find somebody for Rui to guard that kind of fits more into his skill set. But like, everything comes down to the upgrade at the 2 for that specific reason. But I've been happy with Rui. I think he's rebounding better. His decision-making is getting crisper. He brings all of that waves of athleticism that the Lakers can bring from their front line. He's off to a good start this year. 3 more. Hey, Jason, do you think the Celtics can be stopped? And how high is their ceiling with Kristaps Porzingis coming back? Love the show. Keep up the good work. The ceiling is enormous with this particular team with Kristaps Porzingis. He brings the rim protection that they don't have without him. He brings the ability to attack switches on the other end with size, which is something they don't have without him. And then he's just like one of the better above the break shooting bigs that we have in the league, right? So he's a huge ceiling raiser for them. How can they be stopped? It would require a team that can match them in perimeter speed, that can contain the ball, stagnate their offense, and at least allow your best player, whoever that is, to go toe-to-toe with Tatum and Brown and hopefully out-execute them. But that's only going to happen if you have such a strong defense that you can force Tatum and Brown to play a lot of one-on-one. That's going to require switching, right? So any team that has 5 players that can all reasonably well guard on the perimeter, you start switching everything. If you switch everything, you shut down the Celtics' pet actions. If you shut down the Celtics' pet actions, you can make them play iso ball. If you make them play iso ball, you might be able to out-execute them. The problem is you have to be – there's a lot of different elements to that. It's actually very complicated, right? Like the Celtics attack a lot of switching with inside seals, right, where they screen on the bottom side and slip into the open end of the floor. So you have to be a switching team that has a good amount of physical size, and you have to be really sharp in terms of like little details, like navigating those actions and getting out in front of them in terms of like avoiding those inside seals. So like there's so many different elements that go into it. It's so much easier said than done. But if Boston loses this year, it will probably be to a team that can switch everything and has a lot of good perimeter defenders that will force Tatum and Brown to play a lot of one-on-one, and that team, the team that's beating Boston, would need to have a player that can outplay those guys in slow-down half-court environments. Right now, the only roster I look at that I really think has a good chance to do it is Oklahoma City. And even then, I would pick Boston. But at this point in time, we'll see how it goes over time. But they're the only team that I think can really defend, can get away with switching looks. And yeah, I do think that Shea is a better half-court initiator than Tatum and Brown. So that would be the advantage for Oklahoma City there. What's your take on the future of the Pelicans? The way I see it, the entire decade of rebuild and resources have led to such a whatever outcome, and it makes me wonder if they just end up the way they did at the end of the AD days. The problem is the Zion the concept. Zion is such a bad defensive player that you have to put an athletic center next to him that can anchor a defense. But Zion, at his best, has always played with space as a drive and kick player, and that's why they keep going away from their big looks, and that's why Larry Nance was so important to them last year. That's why Jonas Valanciunas was off the floor in every big high leverage moment. Like that's the main issue. Is like if you bring in a stretch 5, a guy that spaces the floor for Zion, then you're not as good defensively as you need to be. If you bring in the athletic center that can anchor a defense, then you don't have the benefit that comes from Zion and his drive and kick potential. So it's kind of just like Zion's kind of like unique build, making him a difficult player to build around. But I do want to see, again, guys, don't evaluate the Pelicans right now. I talked about this with the Lakers. A lot of times in star trades, when you send out multiple good role players, you need your star to come in and play really well to justify it, right? That's what happened to the Lakers. They give up Kuzma and KCP. They bring in Russell Westbrook. Russell doesn't play well. It looks really bad, right? In this case, you give up Dyson Daniels. You give up Larry Nance Jr. You bring in DeJounte Murray, but now he's hurt, so you're not getting anything from him, and you've lost your depth, and you're just not as good as you were defensively, and so that's what ends up being the problem. And so let's give them some time to get healthy and see what they look like. I actually want to skip this one. I don't think it's worth getting into right now. All right, so that's going to be it for today, guys. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. We'll be back on Monday with power rankings. I sincerely appreciate you guys for rocking with me, and I will see you on Monday.